From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got a great show ahead for you today. I think that this past week there was some big news that came out of Washington, D.C., and that was some news that's been bounced around the internet quite a bit since then. People have all kinds of comments and curiosities about this. The report of UAPs or UFOs footage that was released to the world by the Pentagon. And I think that different people in Christian and Catholic communities have had different responses to this. Are UFOs real? Are aliens real? I personally have steered clear of this question a lot of times on this show and otherwise. It's not something that I've really had an opinion on. I've been quite agnostic about it, and intentionally, and I think that it's an important thing to discuss now that it's in the news. And of course, we've got the expert to talk to us today about this, and this is Jimmy Akin. You know him from Catholic Answers and also his Mysterious World podcast. He's going to give us the Catholic view of UFOs. Is this something that we should be worried about? Is this something we should think about? I'm excited to talk to Jimmy later in the show today. Also, Father Joseph Spence will be joining us to talk about Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese. That's a brand new book out from Tan Books, and this is a good one. And it takes a look at the spirituality of one of everybody's favorite saints, and that's St. Therese of Lisieux. Check out my series, They Might Be Saints, which airs on EWTN on Sunday, May 7th. At 1:30 p.m. Central Time, the episode on Father Augustus Tolton. This is one of my favorite episodes where I examine the sainthood cause of the first black priest in American history, Venerable Augustus Tolton, who overcame tremendous challenges both inside and outside the Catholic Church. So that's They Might Be Saints on Sunday, May 17th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. And you can check out my other series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, and you can go to explorewiththemiraclehunter.com to watch these episodes, or you can tune into EWTN on Saturday, May 30th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, and the episode on Benu in Belgium is the one that airs. And in that one, I investigate a stunning Marian apparition in Belgium. An 11-year-old Mariette Becco witnessed 8 visions of the Virgin of the Poor, who promised to intercede for the poor, sick, and suffering. And so that's Explore with the Miracle Hunter Banu on Saturday, May 30th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. We always try to find somebody whose feast day or death anniversary lines up exactly to the day's date, somebody on the path to sainthood. For today, we've got Blessed Vladimir Gika, who lived from 1873 to 1954. In the 365 Days with Mary project, that's where I look at the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. We all know Fatima, May 13th, or Lourdes, February 11th, or Guadalupe, December 12th, but believe it or not, there's a different other Marian title for each and every day of the calendar year. And so for today's date, May 16th, we've got the Sven Caves icon of the Mother of God from Bryansk in Russia in the year 1288. I'll be telling you about that one in just a little bit. And the question of the week, it's a really interesting one. I'm assuming that people know the answer to this, but Our Lady of Guadalupe, is it the only church-approved Marian apparition where an object, the tilma, was left behind? So again, that question was, is Our Lady of Guadalupe the only approved Marian apparition where an object was left behind? I'll do my best to answer that one in just a little bit. And the miracle of the day. On March 16th, 1938, there was a devastating fire that swept through the town of Orani in Bataan in the Philippines. I'll tell you about the miracle that happened that day in 1938. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening around the world, those things that relate to miracles. And this past week, I think that it was big news. Some people look at this as a sign of hope and protection when we talk about the blood of St. Januarius, popularly known in Italy there in Naples on San Gennaro. It liquefied during Pope Leo XIV's visit to the Naples Cathedral on May 8th, coinciding with the first anniversary of his election to the papacy. And so this happened also with Pope Francis when he went there to Naples. But as part of his southern Italy tour, Pope Leo visited the Duomo di Napoli. I've been there myself, and we filmed an episode of Explore at that location. And he took part in a packed liturgy attended by clergy and consecrated persons. And during the celebration, the Pope held in his hands the silver reliquary. It contains the blood relic of the patron saint of Naples. I think there are, 20 patron saints of Naples, but he's the main one. After it had liquefied, and it drew deep emotion and reverence from the faithful who were gathered there inside the cathedral. And I've been there for myself on one of these September 19th occasions where the blood liquefies. And the visit marked a dual occasion for the church and the people of Naples, and it commemorated the 1-year anniversary since Pope Leo was elected on May 8th, 2025. And the miracle of San Gennaro is associated with the liquefaction of the saint's blood. He's a 3rd century bishop martyr, and it normally takes place 3 times a year on the feast day in September, December, and May, and it's closely followed by the Neapolitans. I remember being there. I don't want to call it superstitious, but the Neapolitans were so focused on this blood liquefying, because when the blood liquefies, that means a good year for Naples. And when the blood doesn't liquefy, that means bad times are ahead. We're talking about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, or coronavirus, or financial collapse, or any sort of thing going on that wouldn't be so great. So when that blood does not liquefy, that's doom and gloom for Naples. And so they were excited to see the blood liquefy, I'm sure, related to Pope Leo and his anniversary. So I posted the article to that on my Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. Check that one out for the new liquefaction of the blood of St. Januarius San Gennaro. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week, where we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. And last week, the question was, there was a 4th child present in the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima, and her name was Maria Rosa, or Maria Carrera, often just called Maria Carrera. And she was a friend from the village and not a cousin of the shepherd children of Fatima. And she accompanied the 3 children at the very beginning, and she reported seeing something like lightning or feeling a presence, but she did not see the Virgin Mary, and she did not receive messages. So when people talk about the 4th visionary of Fatima, technically she's not really a 4th visionary. She is somebody who was there with them and felt something, saw something, but not Mary, and didn't receive any messages. So that was the answer to last week's question. Who was the 4th visionary of Fatima? Now, this week's question, we're talking today with Father Spence about his new book related to St. Therese. And so the question today is about St. Therese. What unusual request did the young St. Therese of Lisieux personally make to Pope Leo XIII during her pilgrimage to Rome in the year 1887? That question again, what unusual request did the young St. Therese of Lisieux personally make to Pope Leo XIII during her pilgrimage to Rome in 1887? If you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll have the right answer, and answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Father Joseph Spence about his brand new book, Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill on the Miracle Hunter. When we talk about the great saints in the history of our Catholic Church, there are many. There's something like 10,000 saints. But when we talk about modern saints, people always have a very short list. And one of the people one of the saints whose names come up all the time is Saint Therese of Lisieux, the Little Flower. And there's a new book that's out that I'm excited about that focuses also on Saint Therese, and it's from Father Joseph Spence. And it's called Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of Saint Therese, and it's out from Tan Books. We're so excited to welcome all the way from Rome, Father Joseph Spence.
Hi there, Michael.
It's great to connect with you today. And Saint Therese is one of everybody's favorite saints, aren't they? So this book is a fun one for to connect people to this saint that has inspired so many around the world. And I think that when we talk about Saint Therese, we talk about her little way, and that's the spirituality that she pushed forward, or she embodied, and she shared with the world with her writings. And your book sort of opens the door to that, or helps us to revisit that in this book called Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of Saint Therese. And I know that when some people, maybe men in particular, think of Saint Therese, they think of her little way maybe as a cute or flowery spirituality. Is that how can we understand that? Is that a misconception, or is there something to sort of a cuteness or a smallness to the spirituality?
Well, I think it is a misconception. There is a reason for that. So she grew up in Normandy in France. Even if you visit Normandy today, you'll see lots of fields full of flowers. It was also typical for a young girl at her time in the late 1800s. But it's also a misconception. So she does speak of flowers often. She's also depicted having roses in her hand, because she promised that she would make a shower of roses fall on the earth after her death. So she did like using flowers as an image, but it's a misconception, I'd say, for a couple of reasons. First of all, because Jesus himself used nature to speak about the kingdom of God. So you're using a symbol, reality that's close at hand that all can relate to, but to transmit supernatural things about God. So Therese also did that. And then another reason why it's a misconception is that Therese uses flowers to speak about a lot of things, but also about suffering. One of my favorite poems of hers, she wrote 54 poems. My favorite poem is the one called Une rose effeuillée in French, so an unpetaled rose. And it's actually, she wrote it in the last months of her life, and she actually speaks about her death, So that's not flowery at all,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that perhaps is a misconception for many of her little way is actually challenging and courageous in so many ways. And so I think that her spirituality is something for everyone, especially people who are serious about their faith. And when we talk about Saint Therese, we do picture her as this little girl, but she did have a life of trials. She dealt with so many things. That we talk about fragility, or her sickness, or even the death of her mother. That was such a big moment in her life. And she even overcame different moments of mental and spiritual darkness and anguish. When we talk about Therese, how does this trial of faith of Therese translate to us today who struggle with these types of issues themselves?
I think Therese she's so, she's so close to us today for the fact, even though, she died 120 some years ago, but she's so close to us today for what she lived. Again, you were mentioning, so she remained an orphan of her mother when she was 4. Her father had a cerebral brain sickness when she was 15 and was recovered in the psych ward of the hospital, and then died when she was 21. So she started speaking of being a full-fledged orphan already after the recovery, the interment of her father. So she was only 15. So she's an orphan. She then fell sick and died of tuberculosis. And then again, she had this trial of faith. So she said that it seemed like a wall had been kind of placed in front of her from earth all the way to heaven. So the very idea of her death, and of course of what might come after that, that is of heaven, became a cause of anguish for her, because she thought that heaven did not exist. She thought she would fall into nothingness. So she really participated in the atheism of her age, and really in our age today.
Amazing. We're talking today with Father Joseph Spence about St. Therese, There's a brand new book called Living the Little Way, 6 Ways to the Spirituality of St. Therese. And I know that one of these funny stories about St. Therese, I know that she admitted that she was annoyed by some of the nuns in her order, whether it was the clanking of their teeth or their rosary beads or whatever it was. There were little things that Therese admitted that she was extremely annoyed by those around her. What can we learn from that? How did she handle that? And if she were to give advice to people who have to deal with other people in their own lives who they're chewing or there are other things that bother them, what would Therese say to us?
Yeah, she's very realistic. She also has a good sense of humor and very optimistic. That's one of her human kind of traits that really helped her also in her spiritual life. She also made a resolution during the retreat before First Communion. She wrote, "I will never get discouraged." And she later says that she kept that resolution. So how did she face up with these challenges in a positive way? Well, what she would do is she would return all of these displeasures with her best smile. She was annoyed by various of the nuns. There was a nun who would make biting remarks about the fact that she was not very practical. She was not good at making the little sandals made out of the ropes that they would wear. Again, there was that nun you're speaking about who was grinding her teeth in the choir as they're doing their quiet meditation. There was the nun who would splash her with the water while they were washing the laundry. There was one of the nuns, whom we know her name now, Sister Therese of St. Augustine, who of course died many years ago. She said she would write in manuscript C, this nun, there's a certain nun who has the talent of displeasing me in everything. So again, her tactic was just giving her the best smile. And when she could no longer take it, she would just run away. But none of the nuns ever suspected that she was having difficulties with her patients,
Absolutely. No, it's these are good, very practical things for us. The name of your book is Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese. One of the aspects of St. Therese that I find interesting, and of course I have a great devotion to the Blessed Mother, and through my website I've documented various Marian apparitions and otherwise, and I think that we see with St. Therese, she has this great devotion, but we see that some people perceive the Virgin Mary like statues we see in church, beautiful but static, and they don't really have a real impact, and she doesn't have an impact in their life. So how can that experience of St. Therese teach us that Mary is truly near and she's important to us as we struggle in our daily life?
Definitely, good question. Well, so I wrote a conference on that and then became an article, and I included that kind of the basis was then developed in my book. And there was a priest who was present at the time from Africa, and he said at the end of my conference, he said, if I had heard this conference when I was young, my life would have changed. I would have had a better life, he said, because Therese, and then he explained to me why this African priest had lost his mother and then his eldest sister, who had been like his second mother when he was young. Now, Therese had a similar experience. So she lost her mother again. We talked about this, but when she was 4. And then she had taken Pauline on the day of her mother's funeral. She had thrown herself into Pauline's arms, saying, well, from now on, you will be my mother. So Pauline entered the Carmel, and that came as a surprise for Therese, which deeply hurt her. And it also made her fall into a grave illness, where kind of a neurosis, which hasn't really been diagnosed in a specific way, neither at the time nor even today. She almost died of it. And then actually, speaking of Marian apparitions, according to Marie, who was her sister, who was present, this apparition of Mary, when Mary smiled at her, actually lasted from 4 to 5 minutes. Now, Therese did not specify that, but Marie, her eldest sister, who was present, does specify that. So the Blessed Virgin, the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, actually, speaking of static statues, suddenly came to life. And Therese would later recount, it was Mary's ravishing smile that most moved me. Now, it's from then on that she suddenly discovered that Mary was that mother that no one could take from her. She was the mother that she'd always been looking for during her entire life. And from then on, her relationship with Mary just grew exponentially.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Father Joseph Spence about his brand new book, Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese. One interesting thing, I think, for a lot of people, especially lay people, when they think about people entering religious life, sort of this spousal love for Jesus that Therese talked about. And you have a whole chapter in your book dedicated to her experience of Jesus as her spouse.
Yeah.
And that could be understandable for a nun, but for the rest of us, people who are lay people, does that apply in any way, or how would you see the connection there?
I think it definitely does. Now, I didn't really have time to go into this aspect in my book as far regarding everyone, but the point is that, although one can intuit, the point is that if you leaf through the Bible, just starting from Genesis all the way through to the end, to the book of Revelations, I mean, the fact of spousal love is a theme that just returns again and again, and that it also becomes kind of the best image that God is able to use to help us to understand His intimate and just ardent love for each of us. So, God compares Himself to the spouse of the people of Israel in the Old Testament, and then Jesus Himself compares Himself to being a spouse various times in the Gospels. In the book of Revelations, it talks about the church coming down adorned as a bride for her bridegroom, which is, of course, the Lamb who has been slain, which is Jesus. So all Christians are actually called to this spousal relationship with Jesus, all baptized, potentially all men and women are all called to this spousal love with Jesus, which of course is an image, but it's the closest one that God could find in our human language to help us realize how closely and intimately we're called to be united with Him.
Wonderful. Oh, that's very well put. I think that for a lot of people, that's going to be something eye-opening in reading your book, the Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese. And as we wrap up the interview today, I know that one of my favorite aspects, and you alluded to this already, my favorite aspects of Therese is she promised to spend her heaven doing good on earth. And we talk about these miracles of roses and other ways that she has interceded for us. For listeners who might feel they've lost their faith or their connection with the saints, how can we connect with St. Therese and experience her close to us each and every day, perhaps by looking at your book?
Well, good question. I mean, Therese was extremely close to the nuns in her monastery. She was close to her family members. She was close to everyone, close to her missionary brothers by keeping up correspondence with them through prayer. She was just a very close woman. So that definitely has not changed since she died. But again, she promised she said, I will not rest until the angel will proclaim that all is finished, and Jesus comes again at the end of times. So Therese's mission really embraces all times. She even said that herself. So she is close. That's an objective fact. As far as subjectively feeling her close, a good way is definitely doing the Novena of the Roses. So that's the Novena where you ask for a grace, and then they say that if you receive a rose in some form, then Therese has heard your prayer. I've done it various times, and I've always felt her closeness. So that's a simple way. And then another way is, of course, deepening her spirituality by getting to know her better, her writings, and some books on her, like even my own or others.
Wonderful. And for people who do want to check out your book, it's called Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese by you, Father Joseph Spence. Where should people go to pick up this book?
Well, you can go on the 10 Books site. That's just 10books.com. Then you can go into the New Arrivals tab, and it's in there. Otherwise, just write my name into the search. So that's Spence, S-P-E-N-C-E, and that book will pop up. Someone told me it's available on Amazon. I haven't checked that yet, but I'm sure it's true. Anyway, just through any sort of navigator, on any sort of internet browser, I'm sure you can find it in some way or another.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Father Joseph Spence, for putting together this book, Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese, reflecting on the spirituality, the great spirituality of a doctor of the church, and that's St. Therese of Lisieux, the Little Flower. Thank you so much for this book and for joining us on today's show.
Thank you, Michael. All the best.
God bless. That was Father Joseph Spence. We all love the Little Flower, St. Therese of Lisieux, and we're all trying to get to know her spirituality, the little way. And there's a brand new book out that's going to help you do that. It's called Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese, and it's available from Tan Books. You can go online or anywhere Catholic books are sold. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hey, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I really enjoy the questions on email. I've got a pretty weird email inbox, I must say. Lots of interesting things swirling around in there. But I also love answering questions in person. And I do that when I give talks around the country. I travel 10 or 20 times a year. I go to Catholic parishes or conferences or other gatherings where I talk about miracles. And normally I'm talking about Eucharistic miracles or visions of the Virgin Mary or how saints are made or how the Catholic Church investigates the supernatural. I usually talk for about 45 minutes. And then the audience always asks me questions. And I love that. And I talk for 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes or more. And often person to person, answering people's questions about miracles they've experienced and questions about the miracles in the history of the Church. And so for people who want to invite me to their parish, you can go to my website, miraclehunter.com, and click on the Contact tab, and you can send me a message that way. And maybe I'll be speaking at a parish near you sometime soon. And the question for this week is a good one. It came to me over email. It says, is Our Lady of Guadalupe the only church-approved Marian apparition where an object was left behind? Thank you, Ricardo. Well, thanks, Ricardo, for your question, and it's a good one. So we're talking about the tilma, of course, of Our Lady of Guadalupe. That was the cloak of St. Juan Diego, who gathered those roses, and when he went to show the bishop, he unfurled the tilma, and he revealed an image of the Mother of God emblazoned on that cactus fiber cloth. And that cloth is still in existence, as we've talked about in this show, since 1531. So that longevity of that cloth, it's the only cloth like it in the world, or in all of Mexico, I should say, that survived all those years in such pristine condition. So that's the question. Are there other objects like the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe? Well, there's a handful of things where Mary has left her image, we might say. This isn't a verified miracle, of course, but in 1994 in Clearwater, Florida, there was a building that had an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the reflections of the windows. And that caused a lot of media attention over the years. People really looked at this and thought that this was some sort of sign from God or from Mary. But of course, this is not the type of thing the Catholic Church investigates. And they found that it was something in the reflection of the glass that just happened to make that image that looked like Our Lady of Guadalupe. So we don't consider that to be image left behind during an apparition, because there was no apparition there. And we also talk about Our Lady of Coromoto in Venezuela. There's a piece of paper where there's some sort of a light sketch that some people have attributed to Our Lady that she left behind in this apparition in the 1700s. Well, I don't know. It's possible that that was an object that was left behind in that apparition that's been recognized by the Church according to tradition, but that's not anywhere near what we're talking about with the tilma. And then we can talk about Our Lady of Absam in Austria. There was this window that had an image with the Virgin Mary's face, as it was declared by the local bishop. That's an object that exists, but it didn't relate to a Marian apparition. It just had to do with this Rosina Bucher, I think her name was, as she prayed for her father's return from a mining accident, and he arrived safely. And as she waited and prayed the rosary, that image appeared on the window. That image is still preserved even till today. Is that a image left from a Marian apparition? No, that's not quite it. There was no Marian apparition. The closest thing that I can think of is Our Lady of Las Lajas in Colombia. I was just there a year or so ago and filming this new episode for Explore with the Miracle Hunter. We filmed this image on a rock, this image of Mary and St. Francis and St. Dominic that was said to appear after an apparition to this woman, Maria Muñezes, and her daughter Rosa in 1754, I believe. They received a vision of Mary and those two saints, and then also this image appeared on a rock afterwards. And so that's the closest thing that I can say of an object that appeared after a Marian apparition. But is this a highly approved church apparition? No, I wouldn't say so. It wouldn't fall in this list of investigated and approved apparitions that happened after the Council of Trent. This is something different. The church has recognized it in some way. They recognized the devotion, and perhaps you see the visit of popes or otherwise to crown that image. But have they acknowledged this as an authentic apparition? No, they haven't. Not in the same way that Our Lady of Guadalupe has been honored and recognized by the Catholic Church. So thank you, Ricardo, for your question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe we'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. We all know Fatima, May 13th, or Lourdes, February 11th, or Guadalupe, December 12th. But believe it or not, that if you go all around the world, there are different Marian devotions that honor Mary on different days of the calendar year. And so for today's date, May 16th, we've got the Sven Caves icon of the Mother of God from Bryansk in Russia in the year 1288. And the story goes that Prince Roman of Chernigov, who became blind, requested that the icon be sent to him at Bryansk. A priest went with the icon along the river Desna, and after lodging for the night on the right bank of the river Svena, the icon was missing from the boat. It was found on a hill on the opposite bank, nestled in the branches of an oak tree. And the prince came to the icon and was healed of his blindness. And a wooden church was built in honor of the Dormition of the Most Holy Theotokos, and the tree on which the icon rested was cut up and used as wood for other icons, and the icon became known as wonderworking from the healings of the blind man and otherwise. And that is the Sven Caves icon of the Mother of God from Bryansk in Russia in the year 1288. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can go to 365dayswithmary.com. Check out the Facebook page, 365 Days with Mary, or download the free app on the iOS App Store, 365 Days with Mary, Marian Calendar. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week where we talk about a miracle that happened on the day's date in some year in Christian history. And so for today's date, March 16th, in the year 1938, there was a devastating fire that swept through the town of Orani in Bataan in the Philippines, destroying homes and buildings and threatening the historic church dedicated to Our Lady of Orani. Now, amid the chaos and destruction, many townspeople feared that the church, along with the Blessed Sacrament and the revered Marian image inside, would be completely consumed by the flames. And witnesses later said that the intense panic and sorrow that spread through the community as the fire raged across the town. And when the fire finally subsided, residents entered the damaged church, and they discovered something remarkable. Although much of the surrounding structure had been affected, the Blessed Sacrament in the tabernacle was reportedly found preserved, and the image of Our Lady of Orani also survived the disaster. And for many local Catholics, this preservation was seen as extraordinary and spiritually significant, of course, and devotees interpreted it as a sign of divine protection and the maternal intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary during a moment of great suffering for the town. And that was the miracle of the day, March 16th, 1938, the saving of the icon and of the Blessed Sacrament in Orani, in Bataan, in the Philippines. And for more information on miracles of the day, you can check out miraclehunter.com. Now let's take a look at sainthood news. We always try to keep you up to date on those people who might be saints. This connects with my television series, which airs on EWTN, They Might Be Saints, and also my book of the same name, They Might Be Saints, which is available from EWTNRC.com. I think it's my best one. And so we always try to keep you up to date on people coming down the pipeline in the sainthood process. So on Monday, May 27th, Pope Leo received an audience His Eminence Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect for the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. And during this audience, the Pope authorized this dicastery to promulgate a decree regarding the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Maria Eletta de Jesu, born Caterina Tramazzoli. She's a professed nun of the Order of Discalced Carmelites, born on January 28, 1605 in Terni in Italy, and died in January 1663 in Prague, now the Czech Republic. And she was a professed nun of this Order of Discalced Carmelites. She was welcomed into the monastery at the age of 21. She was in turn the founder of monasteries of the same order in Austria and Prague, and where she died and where the memory of her virtues remains even today. And that is the new Venerable Maria Eletta de Jesu. With one miracle, she will go on to be named a blessed, and she's today's sainthood news item. And the might-be saint of the day is Blessed Vladimir Gika, who lived from 1873 to 1954. And he's today's might-be saint of the day. He was born on Christmas Day in 1873 in Constantinople. And he was born a Romanian prince, the grandson of the last ruler of Moldavia, Prince Gregory V, and he studied in France at the University of Paris, in Romania, and in Rome, in Italy. And he established the Free Hospital in Romania, in the country's first ambulance service. He was ordained in Paris on October 7th, 1923, and he returned to the Archdiocese of Bucharest and cared for his parishioners, the sick, and refugees throughout World War II. And he was arrested by communists in 1952 for the crime of being Christian. He was tortured, buried, starved, and finally martyred. And he died on May 16th, 1954, in Jilava, Bucharest, in Romania, after years of torture, starvation, and general abuse. He was declared venerable by Pope Francis, and then was beatified on August 31st, 2013, also by Pope Francis. And he is today's might-be saint of the day, Blessed Vladimir Gika. With one miracle, Blessed Vladimir will go on to become Saint Vladimir Gika, and he's today's might-be saint of the day. And for people interested in They Might Be Saints, you can go to EWTN.com and check out all the episodes on their on-demand of They Might Be Saints, or go to theymightbesaints.com. Or you can check out, go on the television and watch on May 17th at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, They Might Be Saints, Father Augustus Tolton. I examine the sainthood cause of the first black priest in American history, Venerable Augustus Tolton, who overcame tremendous challenges both inside and outside the Catholic Church. And that's They Might Be Saints, Father Augustus Tolton, on Sunday, May 17th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we've got a great interview ahead for you with Jimmy Akin about the Catholic view of UFOs. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Well, there was lots of news, as there always is, around the world, and one news item kind of stood out amongst the rest this past week, or at least had a lot of people talking, both in person and online. It was buzzing with this new release of information from the Pentagon related to UFOs, or UAPs as they're called now. And this was something that had been promised by President Trump over the course of months, or maybe even previous to that, where he said he was going to release all this information. And we saw the first document dump this past week with hundreds of files, as opposed to thousands or millions, as in the case of the JFK files that were released. This was a smaller release, but it had some people talking and buzzing, and some of the information that was released had been seen already and was known, and perhaps it wasn't earth-shattering because people had been grappling with this sort of thing in the recent past. But the question is will there be more? And we assume there will be more. And what does this document release tell us, if anything at all? Do we have the answer to that question? You know, are we alone in the universe? Has that been definitively addressed in one way or another? And for me personally, I've been sort of agnostic on this issue. I've chosen to not have a strong opinion either way. There's certainly strong indications of something interesting out there, and I appear on this television series on History Channel called The Proof is Out There once in a while, and I talk about the religious phenomena on that show, but there are plenty of discussions of UFOs, UAPs, and otherwise on that show, and the experts, who are all scientifically based, generally give good answers to these things, and in some cases they truly do not have an answer. So I'm so excited to turn to the person who I think is the absolute best person to discuss this with. And you all know him from Catholic Answers, Jimmy Akin, and his podcast, Mysterious World, covers things like this and otherwise around the world. And I'm excited to hear Jimmy's take on this. Welcome back to the show, Jimmy Akin.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here, and you're much too kind.
That's great to have you back. And I think that This was interesting news this past week, and I'll ask you this question right out of the gate. Was the document release a big deal for you? I know you've looked into this stuff a little bit in the past. Was this a big deal, what they released last week, or was it kind of a nothing at this point and we're waiting for more?
Well, I'd put it somewhere in between those two extremes. It wasn't a big deal for me. It might be for people who haven't followed this issue. On the other hand, I wouldn't say it was nothing either. As you indicated, this release of documents or records, properly speaking, since some of them are videos and photos. But this release of records was ordered by President Trump. It's a part of a series of document releases that he has ordered. When he first came into office, he ordered release of JFK assassination records, RFK assassination records, and Martin Luther King assassination records. And then earlier this year, he ordered the release of UFO or UAP related records. And unlike the JFK records, which had largely been consolidated, although there's a question about are there still some out there, the U.S. government does not appear to have a central registry of UAP or UFO related records. And so this executive order that he signed in response to what, he termed incredible interest in the subject, which is certainly true, the executive order applied to multiple different agencies. So what we got in this first batch, because since there isn't a central registry of these records, they couldn't just dump them all at once because they don't know where they all are yet. So these different agencies are scanning through their own internal records, looking for things that correspond to what the president ordered to be released. And so in this first batch, we got about 160 records, which is a very small number. It included about 30 military sensor videos, most of which have not been seen by the public before. It included 14 images, including an image from the lunar surface from Apollo 17, and it included about 120 PDF documents. And these records were found by the Department of War. It contributed about 80 of them, by the FBI, which contributed about 60. NASA contributed 15, and the Department of State contributed 7. And so as the agencies continue to go through their records, they'll find more of these things, and they're planning on rushing them out as quickly as they can. I've seen it reported that they plan to release new records every few weeks, and more specifically, I've seen it reported that they plan to release new records about every 2 weeks. So this is likely, and given the number of records the government stores, this is likely to be the first in a long series of releases.
Wonderful. We're talking today with Jimmy Akin. You know him from Catholic Answers and also his Mysterious World podcast. And he's delved into this issue on numerous podcasts in the past and otherwise researching this. And so in this recent document release, Jimmy, did you see anything that caught your attention that was different, new, or noteworthy? Maybe you can go through some of the more remarkable, give us 3 remarkable cases that were documented that should attract people's interest.
Okay, one thing that has been out it's actually been out for some time, so this is not a new one, but in 1947, General Nathan Twining issued a memo in which he confirmed that the then new reports of flying discs seemed to be a real phenomenon, and they seemed to incorporate flight characteristics that we couldn't explain. He didn't try to say where they came from, but he did confirm that they were real and that they were unusual and they didn't correspond to anything that that we knew about. It's not like this was secret U.S. technology or secret Soviet technology as far as they could tell. The Twining memo is very famous in UFO history, and it's part of this release. So that brings some additional attention to it. It's kind of a pivotal historical document. A second thing that, moving a little more towards our age historically, is they released a number of files that dealt with things that were reported by American astronauts in the 1960s, particularly in the Gemini missions, which were the Gemini missions were 2-men orbits of the Earth, and also in the Apollo missions to the moon. In particular, one of them that they released from Apollo 17, which was the last Apollo mission in 1972. And I actually remember, I was a little boy, my father held me up in his arms to look at the moon while the astronauts were on it. So that Apollo mission is particularly significant to me. Well, it turns out that the astronauts on the moon saw unusual phenomena while they were there. And one of the photographs that's been released is of a trio of unidentified objects in a little triangle in the black lunar sky. And they also have transcripts of conversations between the astronauts and between the astronauts and officials here on Earth, talking about the different kinds of things that they were encountering in space in the Gemini and Apollo missions. A particularly recent item that they've released, one of the many videos. Now, these are all low quality videos because they're largely from infrared sensors. And of course, they don't want to release video from our higher classified systems because they don't want our competitors knowing exactly how good our detection capability is. But one of them was from Greece in 2023. And it shows an object. It looks like an orb. It's like a little point of light, but it does it's flying over the ocean, and it makes some really dramatic turns. You'll see it described sometimes as 90-degree turns, but they're way more than 90 degrees. You'll see the point of light, the object or whatever it is, come in, and then it'll be moving right to left, and then it will almost completely reverse and start moving left to right. And that ability to just double back on its own trail is something that we don't have the ability to do. Our aircraft and so forth, and even drones, need turning radiuses when they're moving at speeds. And we see this object moving without any kind of turning radius. It's just a zigzag. It's going one direction, and then it's going almost 180 degrees in the opposite direction instantly. So that's an unknown flight characteristic that isn't exhibited by the kind of technology we have access to.
Amazing. We're talking today with Jimmy Akin from Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and also Catholic Answers, who delves into these types of phenomena around the world. And I think the big question that a lot of people might have, Jimmy, is that whether or not these particular videos that have been released this past week definitively establish that there's something out there that beyond us. There may be other videos and more information that is released. I think people talk about all these different things, Roswell and otherwise, and different supposed crashes and supposed, recovered information and recovered data. There's all these theories that are out there. If in this document release at some point they say, yes, it is a fact, it is established that alien life is a thing, and it's well established, and everybody agrees to it, what do we do as Catholics? Does this affect our faith in any way, and how does it work with our faith? Explain the Catholic view on UFOs.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that any of this is alien or exotic in any way. I don't know what these things are. I do know that they are unusual or anomalous, but that doesn't mean that we can say with any confidence that they're extraterrestrial or time travelers or interdimensionals or anything else. They may just be classified human tech, but they are anomalous. Now, if at some point in the future, and I doubt this would be anytime soon, But if at some point in the future the government said, yeah, this is definitely exotic, it's not human, then assuming that we're correct, because they could always be mistaken in that assessment, I would say it doesn't change anything in terms of the faith. We already know that God has made other intelligent creatures besides humans. We call them angels. And so if it turned out that he had made other intelligent creatures here in this universe so that they were physical like us, well, okay, they'd be other children in God's family. What that would not tell us is, are they good children or bad children? Because if you look at the angels, there are good angels and there are bad angels, which we call demons. So we'd have to settle that question independently of, are these good aliens or are they bad aliens who are hostile to mankind? But in terms of the faith, it wouldn't change anything about the faith.
And how would we proceed with the idea that potentially one of an alien planet or alien nation might be fallen, just like we are as humans, and would require redemption? What does it say about the second person of the Blessed Trinity and his nature?
Well, it doesn't tell us anything directly about Jesus, because we don't know, are they fallen, and if they are fallen, it doesn't tell us what God might choose to do to redeem them. He might not redeem them. The New Testament notes when angels fell, he didn't stoop to pick them up. On the other hand, he might very well redeem them, and he might have redeemed them through the death of Jesus on the cross here on earth. He might have done any number of other things. God's knowledge of how he could achieve redemption is infinite. There are an infinite number of ways that God knows that he could redeem fallen intelligences. And so it's really up to him. So it wouldn't tell us anything about Jesus. What we know is Jesus is the Savior that God made for the human race. He might also be the Savior of every race in the universe, or God might have made some kind of other arrangements for them. That's up to God.
Very well put. We've been talking today with Jimmy Akin about the news of this past week, the document release related to UFOs or UAPs coming out of the Pentagon. And Jimmy, as we look forward to the new document releases, what is your expectation about what we're going to learn going forward? Is this going to be years and years that we're hearing new information? Are we going to learn it all? Are they going to be holding things back? What's your bet on what's coming next?
Well, they definitely hold some stuff back. Some stuff's just too highly classified to release to the public. Like I mentioned, high-resolution sensor images. They're also, unlike the JFK records, they're actually editing out the names of witnesses to protect witness identities and so forth this time. How long it goes, that I couldn't say. I would hope it would go at least through the rest of the current administration. It might or might not continue in the next administration, depending on who's elected. In terms of the magnitudes of what we're seeing, I would expect it'll be similar to what we have this time. A lot of stuff that, where individual records don't move the needle a lot, but they may move the needle collectively. And there may be occasional records that get released that are more impactful. I'd certainly love to have, clearer answers in this area, because like you, I'm agnostic in this area. I don't know. I know there are unexplained phenomena. What they are, I don't know, but I'd love to know that answer.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be excited to have you back on the show, perhaps in some months when more documents are released and more clarity is established. But I think this is such an interesting topic, and for people of faith especially, I think you gave a great explanation of how we should view this and how it should not be shattering to our faith or questioning our faith in any way. This is something that we can all view with curiosity and interest as new information comes forward. And for people who want to connect with you, Jimmy, to learn about your podcast or to see your work with Catholic Answers, what's the best place that people can go?
For Catholic Answers, it's Catholic.com, real simple. For my podcast, it's mysterious.fm, like FM radio. Or you can go to youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, where I have a video version of the podcast, comes out every Friday. Also, I'll mention that if you want to read the new documents that have been released for yourself, you can go to war.gov, because it's the Department of War, war.gov/UFO. If you want to see an analysis that someone's been doing of them, you could go to warufo.com. So
Wonderful.
The actual files, are war.gov/UFO. Some analysis is warufo.com.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Jimmy Akin, for joining us on today's program.
My pleasure.
God bless. That was Jimmy Akin. Check him out on his Mysterious World podcast, also Catholic Answers. Absolutely fascinating. Like I say, I'm agnostic on this. I've never really had a strong opinion either way, or I know there's some strange, unexplained things out there, but it hasn't rocked my faith or made me question. But I think this is, a lot of people have been asking me about this past week, so we were so grateful to Jimmy Akin for joining us to shed some light on this recent news. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Father Joseph Spence, and his book, Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Therese, and also Jimmy Akin talking to us about the Catholic view on UFOs. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, which airs every week. And on Saturday, May 30th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, my episode on Benu in Belgium airs. I investigate the apparition in Belgium. 11-year-old Mariette Becco witnessed 8 visions of the Virgin of the Poor, who promised to intercede for the poor, sick, and suffering. And I'd like to thank you today for joining me on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.